buckle up, because today's deep dive takes us straight into the mind of Aldous Huxley, the literary mastermind behind Brave New World. We're not just revisiting the story, we're unpacking Huxley's own thoughts about his dystopian masterpiece 15 years after he wrote it.
It's like getting a backstage pass to his creative process. We get to eavesdrop on his second thoughts, his regrets, and how his thinking evolved over time.
And let me tell you, for a guy who predicted a future of manufactured happiness and controlled societies, he's surprisingly candid. We're diving into excerpts from his foreword to a Spanish edition of Brave New World, a goldmine of insights.
It's fascinating how he grapples with his artistic choices, especially with the rapid technological advancements he was witnessing. What's remarkable is that he updates his own timeline for dystopia, and it's a lot closer than you might think.
Okay, so first up, Huxley's artistic regrets. He makes this really striking comparison between revising a novel and dwelling on past sins. It seems a tad dramatic, don't you think?
It is an unexpected analogy, but it reveals a very pragmatic mindset. It's as if he's saying, learn from your mistakes and move on, not just in writing, but in life. Don't get stuck in the past, focus on the future.
Which makes sense, because he actually owns up to a significant flaw in the book, the dilemma he presents to John, the savage character. He's essentially stuck between two terrible options: conform to the world state's artificial happiness or cling to a primitive life outside it. There's no winning.
Exactly. This highlights how Huxley's own thinking had shifted. He seems to have moved beyond this initial cynicism of limited and honestly bleak choices. There's this glimmer of optimism in the foreword, a belief that a third path, one grounded in sanity, might actually be attainable. He unpacks that idea later on.
Okay, get this. Huxley admits he missed something huge in Brave New World, something that had the entire world on edge in his time. Any guesses?
Given the timeline, I'd say he completely overlooked the potential impact of nuclear fission and atomic energy.
Bing, ding, we have a winner.
It's wild, right?
He was writing before Hiroshima, but the potential of atomic energy was already a hot topic. It's like writing a sci-fi novel today and forgetting to mention artificial intelligence. But before we dismiss him as out of touch, there's a reason he didn't focus on the bomb.
While nuclear weapons were a major turning point in history, Huxley's focus was always on a different kind of revolution, something deeper, more insidious. He was preoccupied with the biological and psychological shaping of humanity, not just the physical world.
And he drives this point home with a chilling image, comparing scientific advancement to a Procrustean bed. You know, that messed up Greek myth where if you don't fit the bed, they either hack you down to size or stretch you out.
Right.
Not exactly a fun time.
A disturbingly accurate analogy. It exposes the potential danger of technology being used not for liberation, but for control and manipulation, forcing us into conformity.
Okay, it gets creepier. Almost like he had a crystal ball. Huxley talks about governments and institutions potentially using science to make people love their servitude, which is bone-chillingly relevant today. Think about it. Data collection, social media algorithms, personalized propaganda. It's like he left us a warning manual and we're hitting the snooze button.
And here's where it gets really unsettling. Huxley pushes his dystopian timeline way closer to his present day. What was once a prediction set 600 years in the future is now something he believes could happen within a century.
Wait, a century? That's a huge shift. What made him so much more pessimistic? A century, that's going from like a far-off cautionary tale to a very real possibility within our lifetimes. What shifted his thinking so drastically?
It's like he was hit with this realization that things were changing even faster than he'd imagined. The rapid pace of technology and social change, even back in the 1940s, really troubled him.
So it's not just like, oh, technology is advancing, cool. It's more like, hold on, what are we losing in the process?
Exactly. He saw the potential for technology to be used not just for progress, but for control and manipulation. And he saw those tendencies already starting to emerge in his own time.
And get this, he even talks about marriage, of all things, being totally upended. He throws out this line about marriage licenses becoming like dog licenses, temporary, easily renewed. It's a small detail, but it's stuck with me ever since I read it.
It's a very Huxley-esque way of illustrating his point. He believed that as political and economic freedoms shrink, those in power would likely use sexual freedom as a distraction, even as a tool of control. Keep people preoccupied with pleasure and instant gratification, and they're less likely to question the bigger picture.
It's like the old bread and circuses strategy, but with a dystopian twist.
Precisely. Give people enough superficial freedom, enough distractions, and they might willingly trade away their autonomy without even realizing it.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it.
Yeah.
So we've got technology as a tool for control, traditional institutions being eroded. Where does Huxley go from there? Does he offer any solutions, or are we just doomed?
He doesn't offer a simple solution, but he does present a very thought-provoking question, maybe the question we should all be asking ourselves, he asks. Will humanity choose totalitarian control or self-destruction?
Well, that got dark quickly.
Right. It's not exactly a cheerful thought, but it highlights the stakes, the potential consequences of the choices we make as a society.
So what's the alternative? Does he offer any hope?
That's where the concept of sanity comes back into play. Remember, in Brave New World, John the Savage is trapped between two pretty terrible options. But in this foreword, Huxley starts to explore a third possibility, a community of refugees from the world state.
Refugees, like they're fleeing a war zone.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
They're seeking refuge from everything we've been discussing, the mindless consumerism, the artificial happiness, the total loss of individual autonomy.
So they're like, okay, this world is messed up. We're creating our own thing.
Exactly. They're actively choosing a different path, one based on a different set of values.
And what are those values? What does this refugee society look like? So paint me a picture. What are the foundations of this refugee society?
Well, for one, it's built on a radically different economic model. Huxley specifically mentions Henry George and his ideas about land ownership.
Okay, time for a quick economics lesson. Refresh my memory on Henry George. What's the gist?
Basically, George believed that land should be held in common, not owned privately. People would pay a tax based on the value of the land they use, and that revenue would fund public services and such.
So no more real estate moguls hoarding entire city blocks. Sounds like a tough sell to some people.
Right. It's a radical departure from conventional economics. But the key is, it aims to prevent the kind of wealth and power concentration that Huxley saw as a breeding ground for dystopia.
Makes sense. So we've got a more equitable distribution of resources. What about the political structure?
On that front, Huxley leans towards Kropotkin's anarchist principles, think cooperation over competition, direct democracy over centralized power.
Anarchy. Now that sounds a little chaotic, no?
It's easy to associate anarchy with chaos, but Kropotkin envisioned something different, a society where people voluntarily cooperate and make decisions collectively without needing a hierarchical government dictating everything.
So kind of like a highly organized, self-governing community.
Exactly. It's about individual responsibility and collective action, a far cry from the world state's top-down control.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. But what about technology? We know Huxley was pretty wary of it. Does he envision a tech-free utopia?
Not necessarily tech-free, but definitely tech-cautious. He saw technology as a tool, something to be used carefully and intentionally for human benefit, not something to be worshipped or feared.
So no hypnopedic learning or soma in this society?
Nope. Instead of using technology to control or distract, they'd use it to empower, to enhance individual freedom and well-being.
It's a really interesting contrast to the world state, where technology is all about maintaining the status quo and keeping people in check.
Right. And there's one more crucial element to Huxley's vision.
Okay, don't leave me hanging. What is it?
He emphasizes a return to spirituality. Not necessarily organized religion, but a conscious pursuit of meaning and purpose.
So more meditation, less soma, soul-searching instead of mindless consumption.
Exactly. He uses terms like the Tao and the logos, pointing to something universal, a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. It's about seeking the ultimate end, as he calls it.
Okay, I like the sound of that. But let's be real, is that even possible in today's world?
Right. It does seem pretty idealistic, especially when you look at the state of things. But that's kind of Huxley's point, isn't it? He's challenging us to imagine a different future, one where we prioritize meaning over mindless pleasure, connection over isolation.
And that brings us back to his question, right? Totalitarian control or self-destruction?
Exactly. Huxley is saying there's a third option, a harder path, but ultimately more fulfilling.
It's almost like he's giving us a blueprint for resistance, a way to fight back against the dystopian current we see in the world. So where do we go from here? What can we do as individuals to steer clear of this dystopian future and maybe even work toward something like Huxley's refugee society?
It's not about finding a perfect solution or waiting for someone else to fix things. It's about making conscious choices in our own lives. It's about questioning the status quo, resisting the temptation to conform, and actively seeking out meaning and connection.
It's about becoming the refugees, in a sense. Even if we're not physically fleeing some oppressive regime, we can create those pockets of sanity in our own communities, in our own ways. It's a challenge for sure, but I think Huxley would be proud.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, those small acts of resistance, those pockets of sanity, will be the seeds of something much larger, something that helps us steer humanity towards a brighter future.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Big thanks to you for breaking down these complex ideas and for reminding us that even in the darkest of times, hope and agency are still within our grasp.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep those minds churning, those questions coming, and never underestimate your power to shape the future. Until next time.